Operation Werewolf, a story originally planned in Season 5 of the Second Doctor era, where the TARDIS lands the Doctor, Jamie and Victoria in Normandy, France, 5 days before the events of D-Day. The Doctor would discover that the Nazis are developing teleportation technology for their troops to use across the English Channel. But what other sinister purposes does Operation Werewolf entail? To stop the Nazi threat with technology not yet invented on Earth, from what we believe, the Doctor and the TARDIS team ally with the Resistance and Fergus McCrimmon, a descendant of Jamie. It's a story of uncovering traitors within and an engaging political-driven story set in World War II. Before this, the production team had the idea in their heads to have a historical story featuring the Nazis. This goes back to Season 4, where Brian Hales planned on a First Doctor, Stephen and Dodo story that we're led up to believe, but there's nothing concrete to confirm that was the confirmed TARDIS team for the story. However, Hales was engaged to complete the scripts for the Smugglers, and his idea for a Nazi-focused pure historical titled The Nazis was cancelled because Innes Lloyd and Ian Stewart Black's decision collectively agreeing to scrap the pure historical formula due to poor viewing figures, and the show needed to adapt away from it. Fast forward to Season 5, and the idea for bringing a story featuring the Nazis was brought forward yet again, this time by Douglas Camfield, who directed the Daleks Master Plan, and Robert Kitts. The story was submitted to the production office on September 18, 1967, and a response from Innes Lloyd was made on October the 3rd. Following Innes Lloyd's suggestions to explore the storyline, Camfield and Kitts composed the script for the first episode, but the story went no further and it was dropped. But now, it no longer remains a distant forgotten relic of the past that never seen the light of day, but Big Finish decided to bring the lost stories back with a bang, with the original 3 Doctors being Deathworld and Operation Werewolf, which gives me that War Games appeal, so I was very much interested. So both the lost stories were 100% more appealing to me compared to last year, and as stated, Operation Werewolf definitely gave me that War Games feel, with conspiracies, deception and political storytelling in a historical setting. Like the releases we've had before in July, did this hit the mark? Well, let's find out and review Operation Werewolf. One thing I found in Conspiracy of Raven lacked is the main characters interacting with each other. It focused more on plot than character moments, so it was something I wanted in this story. The setup of the story, great music score, the setting and the atmosphere established gives me that 60s feeling, and as well in style, it does remind me of a BBC Past Doctor adventure. When the Doctor tries to save a soldier who was shot, Jules says to the Doctor, "Are you the English agent?" And the Doctor is now forced to play a character he is not meant to be. A similar plot setup and storyline like Power of the Daleks, where the Doctor played the role of an examiner, more forced into the role because the examiner was killed. But here, it's an English agent and also a physicist. For a 6-part story, which sometimes with Big Finish and classic Doctor Who, it takes some time to move, but it does a great job in setting up the story episode 1. The supporting characters are very untrusting with Jamie and Zoe, and they have to work hard to win the trust of the Resistance, or the French partisans, who treat any stranger as a Nazi infiltrator and a potential mole to break the Resistance from the inside. While the Doctor is with Jules, who is still alive after being shot by Nazis, the Doctor attempts to uncover the date of where he is, and the Doctor is unnerved by the answer, finds out D-Day looms around the corner, and Commandant Muller is about to interrogate the Doctor. There are a lot of characters in this story, and yeah, it can be a little daunting, I've got to admit, especially for new listeners. It may be quite simple, the story and the plot, but characters, yep, there is quite a number to focus on. When Jamie and Zoe team up with the Resistance, we understand top secret experiments are being conducted in France, something that will give German high command a significant advantage of changing history in favour of the Axis power, spreading their Nazi dominion. Muller, while interrogating the Doctor, is getting slightly irritated by the Doctor, who isn't very forthcoming with giving information, and with a slight stutter and nervousness in the voice of the Commandant. He will have no choice but to bring in the SS, who says their methods are a lot more direct. We do hear mention of a character named Schneider, who is part of the SS. The Doctor tries to convince Muller and win him over, but is ultimately unsuccessful. Tries to say that he's not a bad man, but his pride is too great and moves forward using the SS instead, so poor old Doctor, he didn't really convince Commandant Muller. Jamie does rather well in convincing the French resistance in staging an attempt to make an offensive move against the German Nazis, and the situation, it's pretty tense because one wrong move would be costly. Episode 1 is a pretty good setup with very strong set of supporting characters, and that is where the charm comes in Operation Werewolf, and establishing the dynamics of the supporting characters interacting with the main characters. That is where the charm comes with the story, because as a plot, as a storyline itself, I would say it's pretty simple and pretty standard. SS Schneider alludes the Doctor is an honoured guest and knows more about him than the Doctor realises. Now the Doctor is forced into the role of an English agent who is an expert in physics, and he meets Professor Richter, who is going to explain about the work he is conducting, which is mastering teleportation. For the trial demonstration, Paul Jules, who the Doctor helped, is the victim of the demonstration and is ultimately killed as a result. The Doctor refuses and calls them cold-blooded killers, and the Professor says there are alternative methods to convince the Doctor. Francoise and Jamie attempt to gain entry and slip into the chateau, and I wish there was a few more scenes with the two, but this is where Jamie bumps into a character, the actual English scientist and agent with the code name The Doctor is Fergus McCrimmon, and playing faithful to the original storyline and plan. A character named Bruckner reveals the whereabouts of the actual English agent Fergus McCrimmon, which will put the Doctor in a much more perilous position, but it seems the Nazis have something more in mind to conquer the world besides just developing teleportation technology and have the technology to perform Nazi brainwashing. The Doctor immediately strikes back and says, if you rely on brainwashing, you are 100% in the wrong and not popular whatsoever. Operation Werewolf is revealed, and how it works relating to the full moon, which is synonymous with werewolves. It is a pretty cool idea, and it definitely builds the severity of the situation. Without really spoiling it, Operation Werewolf entails the spreading of fascistic ideology across the world in a very effective and rather unconventional way. We see some characters with ulterior motives who are fascist, but are looking to replace Hitler by saying he is an immortal and to keep Nazism to thrive even after Hitler's death. These characters might sound on the side of Hitler in terms of ideals and ideology, but have their own supremacy. When the Nazis like Professor Richter begin to fear the Doctor about being from the future, they commence Operation Werewolf, and the spread of fascism through brainwashing has affected Perea and Zoe, who I never imagined her character saying Nazi propaganda. It adds very interesting moments in the story, like putting a gun towards Jamie's head, and you can see the brainwashing Zoe is facing. Professor Richter has more plans involving the teleportation technology and wants to know more about the fourth dimension being time, and it would be certain death for anybody who travels to the fourth dimension, which the Doctor says sharply and with severity, though we cannot be certain because death would be the best solution. Episode 4 I would say is more run-aroundy, and by the halfway mark it appears we know exactly how the story will play out by that mark, and it is simply to defeat Professor Victor and his Operation Werewolf project from happening, as well as Sir Aubrey who believes Britain is taking the wrong direction and believes it needs Nazi ideology incorporated into the culture. Yeah, he's an absolute nutjob. Sir Aubrey serves as a good villain who is motivated by his own Nazi supremacy and not really faithful to Hitler at all. So episode 6 does turn out to be a rather interesting episode, and the direction it takes, and very refreshing. No alien intervention or explanation is the reason behind the events of Operation Werewolf. It is just exploring human evil and these characters motivated by their own supremacy. Sometimes the standard stuff is all you need to deliver a brilliant story. So who is this audio made for? If you enjoy a political driven story with no aliens incorporated into the plot but more focusing on the evil within human beings motivated by their own ideals and supremacy, I just think that gives it a breath of fresh air. Not everything has to be related to alien intervention. The story, as I said, kind of reminds me and fits rather well in the BBC Past Doctor Adventures, so if you enjoy the Past Doctor Adventures, I think this might be up your alley. The story for a 6-parter is rather simple in its premise and not really too much to it. The charm comes with the characters 100%. And that is my overall thoughts and feelings on the story. It has some good elements that Big Finish have expanded on, such as the Nazis spreading fascism through more unconventional ways and not through alien intervention. A very rich set of characters with their own motivations and intentions, and moves at a steady pace. By no means fast paced, it is a great story and deserves an 8 out of 10. Thanks for watching my review on Operation Werewolf. I will see you next week for Death World. It seems that production has delayed the audio, so it will be out next week. See you then.